this home the focus of multiple investigations, including the SIU investigation.
On the anniversary of local rapper Notorious B.I.G's death, the Bed-Stuy community is taking a moment to remember the hip-hop legend.
When Christopher Wallace, better known as the Notorious B.I.G, was gunned down in 1997, the world mourned not only a rising hip-hop legend, but a man whose lyrical genius had just begun to scratch the surface. In the years that followed, his music continued to echo across generations, his legacy carefully packaged and preserved, or so we were told. Fans believed his estate was in good hands, guided by those who loved him, respected his art, and shared his vision. For decades, the inner workings of Biggie's posthumous empire remained untouched, cloaked in legal paperwork and guarded by a handful of insiders. But just recently, a seismic forensic audit was launched, an investigation that pulled back the velvet curtain and revealed what had been festering in the shadows. What began as a routine financial review unraveled into a full-blown scandal, exposing missing millions, vanished recordings, secret contracts, and chilling evidence of erasure so deliberate it shook even the most hardened industry veterans. Biggie once rapped about the mo money, mo problems, but he couldn't have imagined this. What the audit uncovered was more than financial mismanagement. It was betrayal on the deepest level. Here's what they found in Biggie Small's estate, and it's way worse than we thought. The vanishing millions and the broken trust. When the forensic audit of the Notorious B.I.G's estate began, no one expected the scope of loss it would uncover. What appeared at first to be a routine financial examination swiftly unraveled into a financial horror story, a revelation that shook both fans and family to the core. The audit exposed that millions in royalties, licensing income, and asset value were either unaccounted for or misdirected, raising serious questions about who had been managing Biggie's empire all these years. These weren't just bookkeeping errors. They were evidence of a long-standing betrayal. The missing millions represented not just lost wealth, but a betrayal of trust to Biggie's bloodline and the fans who revered his art, the report concluded. Every dollar lost wasn't just a number. It was a piece of legacy meant to sustain Biggie's children and protect his memory. Investigators found that key sources of revenue, streaming royalties, merchandise sales, film licensing, and posthumous brand partnerships, were either grossly underreported or funneled through a network of third-party shell companies. This network often left the Wallace family last in line for compensation, if they were included at all. Contracts written in legalese allowed for creative interpretations, enabling some handlers to claim disproportionate earnings at the expense of Biggie's heirs. Worse still, these practices had allegedly gone unnoticed for decades. Advance payments were taken against future profits, locking the estate into financial dependency on private investors and corporate partners. These decisions, all made without input from Biggie's children, led to the chilling realization that control over his estate had become increasingly corporate and disconnected from family interests. One insider described the revelations bluntly. To lose money is one thing, but to find out it never reached the family in the first place, that's betrayal. Adding to the heartbreak was the fact that individuals with close ties to these financial arrangements were among those Biggie himself had once warned against. Signed documents and private memos unearthed during the audit indicated that Biggie had expressed clear concerns over who should be entrusted with his estate. And yet, some of those very people now held critical decision-making authority over his legacy. The numbers weren't just damning, they were definitive. Missing revenue wasn't just assumed, it was proven through paper trails, wire transfers, and voided accounting entries. The audit summary noted, this revelation would become a turning point, shining a harsh light on those who had controlled Biggie's empire from behind the scenes and rewriting the history of his posthumous financial legacy. This wasn't just about money. It was about honor, legacy, and a voice that had been silenced not once, but twice. First by violence, and later by quiet, calculated corporate erasure. Fans had believed for years that Biggie's estate was in safe hands, but the audit painted a different picture, one of financial manipulation, hidden agendas, and a betrayal of trust that had lasted nearly 3 decades. And as investigators would soon discover, the money wasn't the only thing that had disappeared. What came next would reveal something far more devastating: the erasure of Biggie's unreleased work, his creative artifacts, and pieces of his soul captured in music that the world would never hear. Biggie's erased archive. As the forensic audit delved deeper into the estate, it revealed that the missing money was only part of the tragedy. What was far more devastating, especially to fans and music historians, was the disappearance of something priceless: Biggie's unreleased material. The very essence of his artistry, legacy, and inner thoughts had been locked away, and now much of it was gone without a trace. At the heart of this mystery was a document known as the Master Index, a meticulously maintained ledger created by trusted archivists in the late 90s. This index cataloged over 40 unreleased tracks from Biggie's peak years. These weren't demo snippets or leftover verses. These were, according to experts, fully formed songs, crafted with the same depth and detail that defined his legendary releases. Many were believed to be his most experimental and intimate work, hinting at artistic directions Biggie never got to explore publicly. However, when investigators examined the estate's physical and digital holdings, the findings were shocking. Fewer than half of those recordings remained. Entire reels of digital audio tapes, which was the backbone of 90s studio recording, were nowhere to be found. These weren't simply misplaced. They were systematically removed or destroyed. The disappearance wasn't subtle, one insider said. It was a void, a gaping hole in the history of one of hip-hop's greatest voices. One particular item caused even more alarm: a hard drive, long rumored among insiders to contain Biggie's personal studio diaries, behind-the-scenes footage, and unreleased material from the Life After Death sessions. This drive was stored in secrecy, allegedly under restricted access. When the estate finally allowed experts to open it, they made a chilling discovery. The drive was completely corrupted. Not just broken or degraded, but wiped clean. Data recovery experts were brought in to investigate, and what they found shocked everyone involved. The data hadn't been lost due to time or negligence. It had been intentionally erased using military-grade wiping software, the kind designed for classified government material. This wasn't a casual deletion, one digital forensics specialist explained. This was calculated. Someone went to extraordinary lengths to erase everything, permanently. That revelation changed everything. This wasn't just about controlling what the public could hear. It was about destroying history, erasing what could have offered unparalleled insight into Biggie's final months, his creative state, his vulnerabilities, his voice when the lights and microphones were off. And the question no one could answer: why? Why would anyone want to eliminate the most sacred remnants of a legendary artist's life? What was on those tapes and drives that someone didn't want the world to hear? Was it unfinished ideas, uncomfortable truths, or raw personal confessions that threatened someone else's narrative? The audit team pointed to a carefully orchestrated purge, an alleged effort to control the posthumous narrative by eliminating anything that didn't fit. There were no public statements, no apologies, no recovery efforts, just silence, and a growing sense that something profound had been lost forever. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths not merely to control Biggie's posthumous releases, but to obliterate parts of his very past. The audit noted, fans had waited for decades to hear what else Biggie had to say. Now they never would. And for those who loved his music, that loss felt more permanent than death. It was a deliberate silencing, one that echoed far beyond the studio walls. Biggie's legacy sale and its hidden truth. On the surface, the 2025 sale of Biggie Smalls' catalog to Primary Wave looked like a modern business move. Just another legacy artist getting a new chapter in the age of streaming, AI, and holograms. Public statements framed it as an act of tribute. The press releases were glossy, professional, and optimistic. "We are committed to preserving the legacy of the Notorious B.I.G.," said one spokesperson from the acquiring company. This partnership ensures his work will continue to inspire future generations. But as the dust settled, a far more disturbing reality emerged. A deep dive into the transactional documents, many of which surfaced during legal disputes tied to the estate audit, revealed a strategy that ran counter to Biggie's own wishes and cut out the very people who mattered most. Hidden deep within the paperwork were contractual clauses that even industry veterans found shocking. The deal didn't just include rights to publishing, recordings, and image licensing. It reportedly granted primary wave authority over advanced technology integrations, such as the right to create AI-generated music using Biggie's voice and to stage hyper-realistic hologram performances, without needing approval from Biggie's children or direct family. One clause allegedly allowed the company to license Biggie's voice likeness to third parties, a practice that has become increasingly controversial in the era of AI music. This meant the label could create entire new tracks, generated algorithmically, featuring a digital Biggie rapping lyrics he never wrote, and sell them as authentic posthumous releases. Even more controversial was the financial arrangement. According to leaked documents, royalties from these future projects, including AI recreations and hologram tours, were pre-allocated to private investors. These weren't just label executives or music producers. They were venture capital firms and silent partners who had bankrolled the acquisition in exchange for a piece of the future profits. "This was never about legacy," said one anonymous former estate advisor. "It was about leverage, turning Biggie's name into an asset class." What this meant in simple terms was that Christopher Wallace's estate wasn't going to receive the lion's share of these profits. Instead, money generated from his voice, likeness, and name would first go toward repaying investors, not his children or family trust. That revelation sparked outrage among fans, many of whom had long believed that Biggie's mother, children, or close circle were in control of his catalog. But insiders said the family had no meaningful input in the deal. In fact, multiple sources claimed they were kept in the dark until after the transaction had closed. Worse still, names tied to the controversial sale matched those found on a handwritten note by Biggie himself, recently discovered during the audit. Individuals he had allegedly wanted nowhere near his business affairs. The note listed those Biggie explicitly distrusted, yet somehow decades later, those very people had secured control over his voice, image, and unreleased works. It felt like a betrayal decades in the making. Biggie had warned of this exact scenario, being commodified and rebranded in death, his message diluted for profit. And now, the estate had allegedly handed over the keys to those he feared would exploit him. The image projected to the public was one of homage and preservation. But behind the scenes, the machinery of commerce had overwritten the artist's will, his family's wishes, and the raw truth of his story. It wasn't just a legacy sale. It was a corporate erasure disguised as tribute. Biggie's letter. That changed everything. For years, people assumed everything of value in Biggie's estate had already been sorted, archived, cataloged, and displayed for public appreciation. But in 2025, during the forensic audit that rocked the music industry, investigators made a discovery that didn't just raise eyebrows, it changed everything. Deep within the underground storage of the estate, in a neglected and dust-covered corner, a sealed box was found. Forgotten, untouched, locked away for decades. When the audit team opened it, they expected memorabilia or old contracts. Instead, they found a single yellowing sheet of paper. No digital backup, no scanned image, just ink on paper, handwritten by Christopher Wallace himself. The content of the note was anything but ordinary. It was a list, clear, direct, and deeply unsettling. On it were names, individuals that Biggie had explicitly marked as untrustworthy, people he didn't want involved in his business affairs should anything ever happen to him. This wasn't paranoia, it was a precaution. A man navigating the high-stakes world of 1990s hip-hop, where betrayal wasn't a rare occurrence, it was expected. "Do not let these people handle my catalog," the the note allegedly read, in Biggie's own handwriting, according to sources close to the audit. Beneath that statement were names that, shockingly, matched those involved in the 2025 sale of his estate. Individuals who had negotiated with Primary Wave, approved licensing agreements for AI recreations, and even pushed for hologram performances. The contradiction was staggering. Biggie had left a clear paper trail, a warning from the grave. But for nearly 3 decades, that warning had been ignored, or worse, suppressed. Until that moment, the people who had facilitated the 2025 transactions were seen as stewards of Biggie's legacy. Now they looked more like opportunists who had knowingly gone against his final wishes. Legal experts speculated that the note could lead to major implications, potentially triggering challenges to the estate's administration and even the nullification of certain rights transfers. This kind of document, if authenticated, changes the legal landscape entirely. One estate attorney said, "It's not just evidence, it's intent." What's more disturbing is how the note was hidden. Not misfiled, not overlooked, but allegedly intentionally buried. The box it was found in bore no archival code, no inventory tag. It had been excluded from every digital database and estate summary for decades. That raised uncomfortable questions. Who hid it, and why? Was it done to simplify the management of Biggie's assets, or was it a calculated move to remove any obstacles to future monetization? Either way, the effect was the same. Biggie's voice and agency were erased from the business decisions made in his name. For those closest to Biggie, this discovery was more than shocking. It was painful. It confirmed suspicions they had whispered about for years, but could never prove. One former family friend said, "He saw it coming. He knew who would try to profit off his name, and he tried to stop it, but they buried his words." The handwritten note, now authenticated and placed in protective custody, became the centerpiece of a brewing legal storm. It offered the clearest evidence yet that Biggie had not only feared posthumous exploitation, but had tried to take steps to prevent it, steps that others deliberately stepped around. The music world was left reeling. Fans who once saw Biggie's posthumous albums, tributes, and merchandise as celebrations of his greatness now wondered, at what cost and under whose authority? This note didn't just raise legal questions. It shattered a carefully constructed myth. The myth that Biggie's posthumous success was built on love, loyalty, and legacy. The truth, tucked away in a forgotten box, showed something far colder. A legacy not protected but overwritten, against the artist's own hand. The truth behind Biggie's estate sale shook fans. For years, the general public believed Biggie Small's legacy was in safe hands. Tribute concerts, commemorative albums, murals, everything painted a picture of loving stewardship. But all of that fell apart. When investigators finally pulled back the curtain, what they found wasn't a celebration of Christopher Wallace. It was a carefully orchestrated erasure. The forensic audit, prompted by suspicions of financial mismanagement, had started small, just numbers and royalties. But it soon turned into something much larger. Royalties from his unreleased work had disappeared, rerouted through a maze of offshore accounts and silent partners. The missing DAT tapes, the wiped hard drive, and the vanished archives weren't isolated accidents. They were part of what the audit later referred to as a systematic removal of historical assets. Behind the public facade of memorialization, Biggie had become a financial engine, but one that had nothing to do with his family. At the heart of this collapse was the realization that Biggie's artistic voice, which once spoke truth to power, had now been silenced again, this time by paperwork, profit, and betrayal. The digital assets built in his name were generating millions, but those earnings weren't going to his children. This wasn't about legacy. It was about return on investment. That's when fans began to see the cracks. Longtime supporters, who'd once believed in the estate's commitment to preserving his authenticity, started demanding answers. Social media lit up with comparisons between Biggie and other posthumous artists. "Is this what they did to Tupac too?" one user posted, while another wrote, "How can you honor someone by ignoring everything they stood for?" News coverage exploded when it was revealed that AI-generated Biggie songs were being planned, without consulting his family or estate heirs. Licensing agreements buried in the primary wave acquisition gave them full rights to generate new tracks using Biggie's voice and image in perpetuity. That clause shook even seasoned music industry executives. The backlash wasn't just emotional, it was cultural. Biggie had become a ghost of himself, not through death, but through digital cloning and corporate manipulation. His artistry had been commodified, dissected, and sold in the name of innovation. And what hurt the most? Many fans assumed all of this had the family's blessing, but the 2025 documents showed otherwise. His children and close kin had been excluded from the negotiations, their voices absent from any meaningful decisions about their father's likeness or catalog. For supporters who had grown up on Biggie's music, the betrayal was personal. They remembered the man who rapped about trust, betrayal, and the hustle, only to find those same themes playing out in the real-life mishandling of his estate. And then came the final sting. The confirmation that some of the people now profiting from Biggie's legacy were the very same names he had asked to be removed from his business dealings, as outlined in the now recovered handwritten note. That alone would have shifted public opinion. But in the context of missing assets, erased recordings, and secret investor deals, it rewrote the public's understanding of everything they thought they knew. By the time the audit report was leaked in full, fans had already made up their minds. The man they had admired for his honesty and storytelling had been betrayed, not by enemies, but by the very machine that promised to protect him. Biggie once said, "Stay far from timid, only make moves when your heart's in it." Yet those who moved on his behalf did so without his heart, without his family, and without his truth. And in 2025, that truth finally came out, shattering the illusion and exposing the real cost of monetizing a legacy. Biggie in the age of AI. In 2025, Biggie Smalls wasn't just remembered through mixtapes or commemorative murals. He was being reconstructed, piece by digital piece. Thanks to alleged fine print permissions granted during the controversial primary wave acquisition, the estate now had the authority to use AI-generated vocals, deepfake visuals, and holographic performances to bring the rapper back into the public eye. But as the technology dazzled fans and investors alike, it also reignited long-standing fears. Who gets to decide what Biggie says or does when he's no longer here to consent? While AI replication of dead celebrities isn't new, the scale and ambition of the Biggie AI project allegedly startled even insiders. Sources familiar with the deal claimed that clauses in the primary wave transaction allowed the company exclusive rights to license and synthesize Christopher Wallace's voice, likeness, and performance style through artificial intelligence for commercial use. These weren't just novelty remixes. The plan allegedly included entire albums composed using voice models trained on unreleased vocals and demo tapes, some of which have now mysteriously gone missing, as noted in earlier findings. This expansion into the AI space opened a Pandora's box of ethical dilemmas. How much of this content reflects Biggie's true artistic vision? What messages or lyrics would he have never approved of in life? And more crucially, should a machine-trained simulation of Biggie even be allowed to speak on current issues, effectively co-opting his legacy into something synthetic? Critics argue that this evolution is less about honoring legacy and more about maximizing long-tail profitability. The danger here is that Biggie stops being a man and becomes an algorithm, one industry veteran warned. Others were even blunter. "We're not preserving him, we're puppeteering him." The moral questions didn't stop at audio. One rumored project involved a fully immersive VR concert, using deepfake technology and machine-generated crowd interactions to simulate a Biggie performance down to minute details. What he'd say between songs, how he'd move on stage, and even how he might react to social media comments in real time. As one media ethics professor put it, "This is no longer legacy. It's a simulation of legacy. And there's a difference." Supporters of the digital resurrection argued it would allow a new generation to experience Biggie's brilliance firsthand. But to many, that brilliance was already being dimmed by over-commercialization and a troubling disregard for what the artist himself might have wanted. In fact, the 2025 letter, penned in Biggie's own hand, served as a poignant counterpoint. Though it didn't specifically mention AI, unsurprisingly, as the technology didn't exist in his time, the distrust it conveyed towards certain figures now in charge made many fans uneasy. Would Biggie have agreed to become a virtual avatar performing at tech-sponsored events, or to have his lyrics rewritten by a machine? No one knows for sure, but the absence of clarity, consent, and family involvement continues to haunt this brave new phase of Biggie's posthumous career. The implications go beyond just one artist. As the industry inches closer to automating the voices of the dead, Biggie's estate has become a high-profile case study in what happens when technology, money, and memory collide. In the words of one fan who grew up listening to Ready to Die, "I came here for Biggie, not some corporation's remix of him." What happens when the heart is no longer in control of the art? When legacy becomes a business model and memory gets rewritten by machines? As fans, we owe it to Biggie to keep asking the hard questions. Was his legacy preserved or sold off, piece by piece? Was his voice uplifted or strategically silenced under layers of paperwork and corporate agendas? Every lyric Biggie left behind carried the truth of his time. But now that truth is under threat, not from enemies on the streets, but from suits behind closed doors. This isn't just about one artist. It's about how we protect the soul of music itself. Let us know what you think in the comments below. If this story moved you, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more untold truths behind the legends we all love. Because sometimes the past isn't buried, it's being reprogrammed. Thank you for watching, and we hope to see you in our next video.